Hello, my name is Dante Renee, and welcome to the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more. Like tonight's film, this is 1986's Pleasure Maze. Okay, we're just going to get that poster right there because this is actually part of the Peakorama big 2-unit show by Vinegar Syndrome Continuous Adult Shows with Lover's Lane, which I've already looked at on this YouTube page. You can check it out there. And both of these movies, including Pleasure Maze that we're looking at tonight, directed by DUMONT. And on the back of the disc here it says, San Francisco-based filmmaker DUMONT was a latecomer to the world of theatrical sex films, but these two early efforts showcase his distinct approach to erotic cinema. This is the back of the movie here, and if we're going to look at the screenshots for Pleasure Maze, they get the most right there at the top. We got 3 right there. And here we go, folks. Here's the poster one more time. Look at that. It's a great poster. And it says starring Tracy Adams, Amber Lynn, Stacey Donovan, Joanna Storm, Nina Hartley, Lily Marlene, Joey Silvera, Jerry Butler, Billy D, Eva Greco, Jason Jewell. And it says they're programmed to please. DUMONT's Pleasure Maze. And if you look really, really carefully at the bottom of her breast there, you can see like some kind of like lightning or something coming out, or threads or something. Very, very interesting stuff here. So this is 1986's Pleasure Maze. Both of these films actually have Tracy Adams in the front, and Tracy Adams only has a small role in this particular film. So let's get into Pleasure Maze, 1986. I have a series of notes here. So if you see my eyes divert, you'll know where I'm going. And this is a really great 80s sci-fi X-rated erotic film. It's just awesome, awesome stuff here. You know that I've looked at other movies on this YouTube page, kind of within the same world, the same ilk, like Star Virgin, Starship Eros, and even some ones that are softer, like Spaced Out, okay? So there's Flesh Gordon versus the Cosmic Cheerleaders. I was trying to think of that one too. Those are other ones that are on this YouTube page. Let's get into Pleasure Maze, though. Another 80s sci-fi erotic X-rated film. Now, as soon as we get into this film, the opening credits, we have an opening sci-fi, kind of the words are being pushed out to the screen. You know, they're stagnant and then they push out. And it's a real sci-fi, very elegant, very sophisticated, dark. And we have, throughout this film, starting right at the beginning, we have space ambient sound score that sounds a lot at times to me like, Forbidden Planet. The score to the kind of ambient, lack of melody, atmospheric score of Forbidden Planet. It has late night mystery to it as well. You know, true late night mystery, and a true sense of kind of spatial realms. And we have some narrated words on screen at the beginning of this movie. You think of a film like Tobe Hooper's original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where you have some kind of narrated words at the beginning there, kind of dealing with the story of this film. A couple, like 3 paragraphs about, I believe. You can actually see that screenshot on my Instagram page for the 10 Room Bizarro. And we have a story dealing with robotic hookers called night droids. And we have some shots here, some very interesting shots that obviously look like sets. But the designs of them almost remind me a bit of the last section of the film Night Dreams, which I've looked at on this YouTube page already. A center bed in this one section, a center bed with white sheets blowing around it. We have dramatic sci-fi late night emotional synthesizer in the score as well. And it ebbs and flows in between that kind of slightly melodic late night score to kind of this just ambient soundscapes, beautifully repetitious ambient soundscapes. The sex scenes in this film take their time. with positions. You do a position, you really take your time with that particular position. There are distance shots and close-up shots. Lots of coverage on the sex scenes in this film. Lots of shots of a woman's front pelvis, her crotch, when she's on top of a guy. Very interesting to focus mostly on the front than on her behind, which is typical for X-rated movies when a woman is riding a guy. The camera glides around the scenes, the beds in the center of these rooms. And gliding around the curtains in a room, if there are curtains in that particular room. Now, the movie's called Pleasure Maze, and we are essentially supposed to be in this facility of sorts, a maze of hallways, and we get glimpses of that in various rooms and various hallways, and even a kind of a locker room. We have narration with our lead character in the film, who's jogging in kind of an industrial wasteland. Almost reminds me a bit of David Lynch's Eraserhead. If there was color, remind me of Philadelphia at that time. We have, in the storyline, there are different nitroids with different capacities. And there's been an evolution of sorts with these nitroids, with these robotic hookers. And there's also flashbacks. With the past and the present in a way that almost messes with the viewer's element of time, especially at the beginning of the film. We have a scene where a character ejaculates inside of a woman, so you're not seeing anything, and it's quite shocking at first. You're thinking, oh, that's not typical. And then you see the woman's vagina, and you see the ejaculation on there, which would be modern days, I guess. In a way, modern days, they would almost call it a cream pie, but it's not really, it wasn't really that. You just kind of saw the after effects. We have an ejaculation on a woman's glove. We have a control center in this movie with two people working it, with lights and sounds, as you learn about the facility, as you learn about the time. There are some overhead shots. Great environment shots, lots of coverage in these kind of very simplistic yet atmospheric sets. Essentially these are sex robots, and it's actually so interesting because 1986, it's quite ahead of its time, because we're actually in 2017. We are actually on the brink of really making these things. I think they've already been made, like real sex robots, and these robots need activation. They need activation of sorts to be mobilized, and it's very interesting. They kind of are just stagnant there, and then they get activated by the control center. We have a bed in the center, and in place of curtains, we have different lights around the space, soft lighting. Interesting ambient lighting to the ambient spatial music and soundscapes. This movie really exists in a future world, a new world. The only times you see the outside world, it's like a wasteland. It's barren. It's ugly. And the majority of the time we are inside of this facility, other than a few moments outside. We have two guys, one girl. We have two girls, one guy. We have face sitting. We have masturbation from a woman. We have lesbian scenes and lesbian bringing in another guy. So lots of variety with the sex scenes. But as I've said before, with X-rated cinema and any cinema, that you definitely see the particular director's likes and fascinations. And in erotic cinema, maybe fetishes or things that they prefer. And I think that's fascinating. As you see directors kind of be consistent with what they like, sexually even, and what they want to see, or what turns them on. And that's what they will put in a film that is meant to turn the viewers on, okay? And you look at directors like Jess Franco, you definitely see what he likes. You look at directors that I look at on this YouTube page, like Walerian Borocek and such. So, and even Carlos Tobalina. We have narrow sci-fi-like hallways. Looked like, aluminum foil, but well done. Narrow. And also these big, a big wide open white hallway. And characters walking right into the camera, kind of from the waist down. This one particular character wrapped in a kind of an aluminum foil miniskirt. I think it might be Nina Hartley, I'm not exactly sure, but it's just very sexually attractive, the way like her thighs will go right into the camera, the way that happens. And we do have foil, aluminum foil and bubble wrap outfits and headbands, and streamers, the kind of, awesomely low budget, foils, headbands, and streamers, and just total sci-fi, weirdness there. A couple sexual positions that you do see a lot in this film is missionary, actually, and blowjobs. Those are a couple, and we have very loud moaning in this film. And if you remember Duck Dumont's other film, Lover's Lane, there's definitely an emphasis on moaning in that film as well. And the interesting thing is that with the sci-fi space soundscapes in this film, they will be very low. I mean, if you have good audio equipment, you will hear them the entire film. If you don't have good audio equipment, you might only hear the moaning. That's very, very interesting. So definitely turn the volume up and, make sure you have a good sound system. And you can really hear the different levels in this film of the late night mysterious, sci-fi soundscapes, and then the moaning in the forefront. And sometimes the soundscape will creep up and become a little bit louder. There's some really interesting editing in this film. Great editing, actually. Cuts showing different rooms, simultaneous situations. The editing itself feels spacey to me. It encompasses this space-time world that we are in, to me. And it's well done. The editing really cuts. It can cut between sex scenes. It can cut between different hallways and conversations and characters and the control center. There's one scene where one of the women or robot hookers takes the man's penis and just kind of hits herself in the face with it, which is not something you typically see. We have a fur coat in this film that takes on its own world. This fur coat, as you enter into cold storage facility. There's a great quote here from one of the characters, kind of a male sexually frustrated character in the film, a person, where he says, so you're still dressed. He says, still dressed. There are still dreams. He had a dream that one of the real human women that he works with are, kind of took off her coat and she was naked underneath, and she knew about that, but she didn't fulfill his dream. And he said, well, there are still dreams. There are still dreams. Interesting on the sound, all of a sudden you'll hear some reverb on people's voices, which I thought was very, very interesting. All of a sudden there'll be this reverb, as if they're, somebody tweaked the equalizer and now they're in like another zone, or another, like in another time zone or something, another space. And it's really bizarre that it just happens in the same space. We haven't, instructions are given to the robot even during sexual situations, talking to the controllers who are controlling or activating the robot. So it's very, very interesting. There's this one character, this one guy in particular, I don't know his name, but I've seen him before in other X-rated films in the Golden Age, but he is just, he talks the most during the sex with his robot that has the headband and whacks herself in the face with his penis. And he says this, "You make me so happy. You make me so happy." And there's also a malfunction in this particular sex scene that he has, where she starts repeating something over and over and over again, and he has to get instructions from the control center and to kind of pull her ear, the right earlobe, the correct one. And very, very interesting. You're reminded, oh, they are robots. You're reminded it's not just a regular woman. A couple movies that this film reminds me of, and I'm not gonna necessarily get into it, but I'm just gonna name off a few movies that this movie reminds me of, or in some worlds of these, some cinematic world. Blade Runner, Hostel, Rob Zombie's 31, Jess Franco's Blue Rita. We also have some soundscapes in this film. Interestingly enough, I said Forbidden Planet, but also some soundscapes from the 80s film Forbidden World. It almost sounds like some of that music, which was recently reissued on vinyl. But you can find that soundtrack anywhere, and that's a Roger Corman produced film, I believe, Forbidden World. Some of the sounds remind me of that. Some of the atmospheres, the sound atmospheres remind me of that. We have this great room with. It's a shot basically of the cold storage facility. It's kind of foil neon cold storage window shot. with some like frosting around the window. You can actually see a shot of that on the back of the DVD that I showed at the beginning of this video, I believe. We have some jokes about a man's age. You know, he's older than the other men. It's our lead character. And there's an interesting plot element in this particular film where the robots, as they evolve and as the makers of these robots, you know, work on them, the robots don't just only give pleasure. They soon learn to take pleasure as well, which one would think would also give pleasure to the man as well. So very interesting. There's this one room with kind of this neon vibe to it. It's kind of like the last room, the last room of the film, the last section of the film. They remind me a lot of the kind of the world of Ken Russell's Crimes of Passion, and just very, very interesting. There's a kind of a section in here with making someone come without genital contact and making that a point. There's a quote, "That's not where the tongue goes, huh?" You know, the tongue's not going to go down to the genitals. It's going to stay on the stomach or on the breasts, but it's still going to bring you into coming. So very interesting. We have some wild female nipple sucking in this film by Joanna Storm. Multiple scenes escalating together in sexual ecstasy. Definitely something that happens in this film with the editing. Interesting, in the control panel table, there are some visual restrictions, not really seeing explicit sex when the guy enters into the scenario. It's very, very interesting, and it's very, very limited when you do see. But the table is like really restricting angles, but the camera doesn't really go behind the table much. Very interesting, that one scene. Now, something I definitely wanted to mention also is that there aren't many butt shots, or just shots from behind in this film, from behind of the girls. It's mostly from the front, but then you will get butt shots at random, especially Amber Lynn's scene at the end in the last section of the film. So very interesting, just the perspective of Duck Dumont in the way that he's filming Pleasure Maze, sexually. Dreams and fantasies fulfilled within a fantasy factory. Yeah, it's a definite theme in this film. Joanna Storm's character in this film, she's very, very intense. Reminds me a lot, I believe her name is Sharon Kane in Throat, 12 Years Later, which I looked at on this YouTube page. You know, very intense and sexually, aggressively intense and dirty talk and wild, you know, that kind of vibe. There's interesting shots in this film where you're not exactly sure. The viewer is left perplexed. You're not sure what's happening, who the people are. There's a weird machine that one of the characters is rolling down the hallway. There's outfits and shots of people wearing different outfits, coming from different directions, sometimes nude, and you're not exactly sure where people are going. A character that you saw previously, where are they going? What are they doing? Is that somebody I've seen before? I can't tell. It's very, very interesting how the shots really bring you into this weird space world. The robots really are essentially like virgins, because anybody who would kind of have a fetish for kind of the schoolgirl vibe or the virgin vibe, having sex with a virgin, would love the robot hookers in this film, because you have to give them instructions sometimes on what to do. Only certain times. In the lesbian scene, she had to get instructions, but on the rest of them didn't need instructions that much. So interesting. Maybe, yeah, it's very interesting. Sometimes they need instructions, but sometimes they're just completely autonomous. There is an element of male jealousy in this film as well. Interesting things with men in this film, you know, from kind of making fun of a man aging, which is not something you typically hear, and then also kind of some jealousy as well. The ending of Pleasure Maze breaks the fourth wall, and there is a comedy at the end, right at the end of the movie, a comedic fourth wall twist that deals with commercialism, that deals with business. And you know, maybe, you know, you think about the ending of the film and you think about the themes of that kind of quirky, fun ending, and you think maybe the actors themselves in an X-rated film You know, need to remember, this is business. I can't get involved romantically. Or, you know, maybe X-rated films or erotic films in general. You know, remember, it's still a business. You know, it's an interesting theme in here. The ending credits of this movie, powerfully abrupt when they happen after that fourth wall twist, and really late night magical. You know, Pleasure Maze is where the sex is the substance, as I said before. We have great long sex scenes in the film that focus on the sex scenes and really focus on positions. And this is 1986's Pleasure Maze. Here it is, folks, by Duck Dumont. There it is. Wait, there you go. Look at that. Awesome stuff right there. Thank you so much for watching the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page, where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more, like 1986's Pleasure Maze. Please feel free to check out all my other videos in this YouTube page, as well as my own personal films, by Googling Apartment 1014 Films. Thank you so much, and good night.